In these uncertain economic times, it's easy to be worried about protecting your wealth, your hard-earned savings, and your family's financial future. Plunging interest rates, the devaluating dollar, and political unrest constantly threaten what you have worked hard to earn and all that you own. That's why now it's more important than ever to protect your assets and have the money you need to make your dreams come true. Welcome to the Global Wealth Fortress Report with successful global entrepreneur and wealth preservation expert Joel Nagel. Joel's helped thousands of people just like you protect what you have so that you can make even more and make your every dream come true. So, sit back and enjoy Joel Nagel's offshore expert advice on how you can live the good life at a great price, where the sun never sets on your financial fortress.
Hello. This is Carol Carter, and welcome to Joel Nagel's Global Wealth Fortress Report, which is very, very important today. You need a fortress because the U.S. economy continues to go into the tank. Joel, what are you telling your clients at Nagel and Associates to do as this thing continues to crater? What's up? What's going on? What do we do?
Hey, Carter. Thank you. It's good to be with you. I'm coming to you today from the Table Rock Lodge, which is a jungle lodge resort in western Belize. It's not far from the Guatemalan border. And sometimes when you're here, you know, it's easy to forget about all the chaos going on in the world. I woke up this morning to the sound of howler monkeys, and the birds are flying, around out here, macaws and toucans and all that. So it's a really beautiful place, and it's an easy place to forget about the problems of the world. But the problems are here, and you're right. We're always trying to come up with real world solutions, and those solutions change, almost weekly, almost monthly. It's a constant change. You have to look and see what's going on in the world. A couple months ago, we didn't have, a war in Europe, the first war in, 4 generations. We have, the Fed has now raised interest rates again. I think it's a very unsuccessful attempt to rein in inflation. And the reality is, to really rein it in from a Federal Reserve perspective, they're going to have to jack interest rates a lot higher. I don't think, a couple percent is going to do it. We may be back to the Jimmy Carter era of, 16, 18% inflation in order to rein this monster in. And it's pretty simple how this happened. And, I'm not a big fan of the current administration, but the reality is the economics behind it go back much further. The Biden administration is as guilty as the Trump administration, as guilty as the Obama administration, as guilty as the Bush administration. And that is that, we are solving our problems by printing money. We're trying to solve our problems by printing money. And, like one economist said, it's like trying to dig yourself out of a hole by digging deeper. And, that's where we are now. Under much of the Trump years, we didn't feel it so much. In fact, they said inflation was all-time lows and what have you. Why was that? Well, inflation is not only how much money is printed, but how quickly that money circulates through the economy. That's called velocity.
Yes.
So it's a math formula. You have the sum of the dollars printed, which is enormous, times velocity. Well, if velocity is 0, we know from, math 101 that any number times 0 is always what? 0. So, particularly during the early stages of the COVID lockdowns, people weren't going out, they weren't spending the money. So even though the Federal Reserve was printing trillions, literally trillions of dollars, I saw some statistic that, in that period, something like 90+% of all money ever printed in the history of the United States was printed in a short period of time, and that's mind-boggling, right?
Joel,
But,
the figures are, it took 227 years for the U.S. to print its first 6 trillion. In the 24 months of the COVID hysteria, the Fed printed 6 trillion.
right.
227 years. So what you're saying is unbelievable.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you, and that's a good. You know,
Yeah.
I kind of have read that somewhere, but I didn't have the exact number. But
Yeah.
the point is, so now you go from 6 trillion to 12 trillion, but the velocity wasn't zero, but it was very slow because people are staying at home. You know, they're buying their absolute bare necessities like food. They're not going out. They're not traveling. They're not investing. And so because of that, you know, inflation was in check. But now as people emerge from their, you know, from their living rooms and are going out and traveling again and spending money again. And, you know, I mean, I flew the entire time during COVID, and I flew in a lot of empty planes. And it amazed me, like, well, how can these airline industries do this? Because they're clearly losing money. Not anymore. The planes are all full. I mean, you know, you see articles every day about, you know, luggage getting lost and people being misdirected. But, you know, and I've had to deal with some of that. But the planes are full. So people are traveling, the airlines are making money, people are spending money. So that means that now you have all this money that's still in circulation. It actually has continued to increase because the Biden administration continues printing. And you have the velocity increasing. And that part of it, the government doesn't have any control over. So they do have control over how much money is printed, but they don't have control over the velocity. So velocity is picking up. The effect is the money's flowing faster and faster. And in areas where, you know, people want things, housing, food, gas, you know, all the main things that most people want, you have people spending more and more on it, which is driving prices higher and higher. So that's the root, you know, cause of inflation. And until the interest rates get high enough that it makes people stop spending, stop traveling, stop putting gas in their car. I mean, it happens first for the people who can afford it least, unfortunately. So that's why, you know, not only in the US, but other countries, you see people going to the streets. I mean, in Panama, for example, you have huge protests going on and barricades. Why? Because they can't afford these increases. They can't afford.
Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
that's the background. That's where we are right now. And, you know, I think anybody, whether you're, I mean, obviously the very first thing you have to worry about is your day-to-day needs. So if you're at the lower end of the economic spectrum, you're just trying to figure out, well, how do I get by? And it's interesting that some of these strategies and solutions for my wealthiest clients also make complete sense for my clients or anyone that has the least amount of resources. And, you know, one of those solutions is right behind me, and that's Belize. You know, you don't have to necessarily be in the jungle. You know, Belize has mountains and islands and cities, and, you know, it's got all the spectrum of options that people could want. But the point is, the cost of living here is lower. Not only here, but the whole region, it's lower. So if you're on a fixed income, pension, Social Security, things like that,
right,
you come to a jurisdiction like this because you can live better with less money. And that is a real world solution for anyone that can do that right now. Rents are cheaper here. I mean, in the States, rents are going through the roof. Property is still relatively inexpensive unless you're in the high tourist areas like Ambergris Caye. If you come out to the central part of Belize, you can buy property for, you know, a couple $1,000s an acre. That's nothing. And you could have the Mennonites, who are a force here, build you a very nice, you know, 2-bedroom home for, you know, 20,000 Belize dollars, which is 10,000 US dollars. So then you start thinking about that. Hey, I can buy a little farmette for 10,000. I can put a house on it for another 10. I can grow my own food. Like now, and then I get $2,000 a month from Social Security. Like you've created a very nice, you know, lifestyle for yourself. And if you're a wealthy person, you look at a jurisdiction like Belize for investment because there's going to be future increases in costs of everything, including real estate. You might want to buy a condo somewhere that can be rented out to tourists to make money. You have the legal structures and legal protections here in Belize, which are fantastic. I mean, if you're worried about getting sued, if you want to have a creative estate plan to leave money to your children, your grandchildren, there's really no better jurisdiction to work with than one like here.
2 points. 2 points. Putting in, if I may put in perspective what you just said. This chart I always keep handy because I think it's fascinating. Per capita income of countries in Latin America. Okay. Addressing the point you made about the cost of living. If you look way down at the bottom here, there's the average per capita income in Belize. Okay. There's the average per capita income in Belize, which is $3,970. If the per capita income is $3,970 and you're bringing in, as you just said, like Social Security, $2,000 a month, that means that your annual income is, what's that, 6 times the average income there. Well, you can live pretty darn well. You can live pretty darn well in a country like Belize. So Joel's right on target with the cost of living. Then in terms of investment, I happen to know where Joel is right now, Table Rock in Belize. There we go. We're back. I just held up the chart for him. You saw the chart I held up, right?
I did, and I'm sorry the Wi-Fi cut out here for a second, but yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think that's a great visual to show people, what the real costs are here compared to North America, and that just means whatever dollars you have to work with, whether you're rich, middle class, poor, doesn't matter. Your dollars, whatever you have, it's going to go further here. And that's why people continue retiring, and even young people. There's a lot of digital nomads moving here. COVID has sort of proven that you can work remotely. So we're getting people of all ages, 30s, 40s, 50s. They're maintaining their jobs in expensive cities like New York and Seattle and Miami, so they can, capture those higher wages in a lot of cases. But then they move to a place like this where it's low cost of living, low crime. I mean, you can live in a little community like the community here where we're based. It's like Mayberry. Everybody knows everybody.
Right.
You don't have to worry about drug problems. You don't have to worry about crime problems. I mean, it's a simpler life. It's not for everybody. If you want, if you want big cosmopolitan New York, you're not going to find it here. But if you're just looking for a nice quality of life, where you don't have to worry about crime and your money's going to go a lot further, then this is a great place. And if you have resources to invest, the kind of structures we can create here are much better than the ones in the U.S. because the legal structures and the legal infrastructure is what I would say is very pro-defense. It's not pro-plaintiff like in the U.S. It's pro-defense, meaning it's very difficult. In some cases, it's even impossible to get standing to bring a suit against something like an asset protection trust. So
excellent.
If I use this jurisdiction to put my money in, and by the way, Belize is very flexible with the structures. So you can create a legal structure here. I have people all the time, they say, well, I don't want to put my money in Belize. No problem. You don't have to put a cent here. Create the legal structure here. Let the legal structure here make the investments for you wherever you want in the whole world. And the trust here is the legal owner, right? So it owns those assets, but it could be real estate in Europe. It could be, gold in Canada. It could be whatever investments you want. But instead of holding them in your name, which if you get sued, those assets, regardless of where they are going to be subject to, forfeiture and plaintiffs and, people coming after those assets. But if you put them in a trust here, you can put your hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And those assets aren't yours. So if they're not yours legally, how can somebody take them from you? That's sort of asset protection 101. I'm sure we can talk about that more, but I bring it up because that is an integral part of, the reason people use a jurisdiction like Belize. It's why I'm here. I'm not here looking for a, super low cost of living. I'm here looking to help my clients protect and grow their assets. So Belize is something that you have both ends of that spectrum. And it's also something where you can be wealthy, middle class, or poor, and you're going to be better off from a financial perspective as well. So that's really the Belize Advantage 101, and maybe a way that you can help solve some of the challenges that you have with inflation. And it's not only that. I hear a lot of people coming down here and they just want a simpler way of life. They're telling
Yes.
me, Joel, we don't want our kids learning about critical race theory. We don't want them being told that they need to examine whether they're a boy or a girl. We don't want to worry about, riots in the streets. We just don't want any of that. And, Belize is great for that too. So if you get a chance, come on down. Table Rock's a wonderful place to visit. And, I think most people will find Belize is a very small country, but in the small country, there's a lot of diversity. You have some pretty big hills, borderline mountains. You have pine forests, you have plains, you have towns, you have villages. You have the Keys. There's 400 islands that dot the Caribbean Sea, the largest of which is Ambergris Key, where, ECI is very active. They have they're building a Marriott. There's a Best Western. So if you want those kinds of creature comforts, they're here. If you want to come out in the jungle and find a cool place to hang out and see birds and go look for jaguars, that's where I'm sitting right now. So hope all your viewers will come on down.
And I believe we talked earlier about investment. Where you are, Table Rock, you and your partner Mike Cobb, if I'm not mistaken, are getting ready to expand with the new residential community. And to me, when you talk about that, both in terms of perhaps equity build and cash flow, that community may be a good investment. What do you think?
Yeah, it's still on the drawing board. We're looking at doing a sort of a tiny home jungle community where people can come and stay. They can also put their units out to rent if they're not living here full time. And it's also, for some people, it's kind of an end of the world place. If there's an apocalypse, they feel like it's a safe place to come. The region here is very self-sufficient in terms of food. They I had a wonderful breakfast today with a huge platter of fruit that was all grown locally.
Right.
Locally produced eggs. Everything was locally produced. So, they don't have to worry about food shipments coming in from outside. I think that was a weakness that popped up with a lot of the Caribbean countries where, during COVID, a lot of the ecosystem broke down in terms of shipping. And so, they were worried about food shortages in places like Jamaica and, some of the other little small Caribbean islands, but we never had that here in Belize. In fact, Belize is actually a food exporter. We export food to Guatemala, Mexico, and the Caribbean. So, in some cases, the U.S. we export a lot of seafood, in particular lobster, and various kinds of fish. And then some of the more exotic things are actually shipped all the way to Japan. A lot of the exotic sea urchins and things like that. So Belize can produce food for itself, and it can export. And if I want to go someplace as a plan B, I mean, to me, that's a minimum requirement that the place you're going can produce its own food, because if not, then your plan B is dependent on somebody else. And if you're leaving the U.S. but going to a little island country where all the food comes in every day from the U.S., well, then, have you really accomplished your goal?
You've accomplished your goal. And I think Table Rock, once the community is built, and I understand, it's still drawing board stages, but I think we're talking about almost an off-the-grid community. Solar power, right? The water supply, everything right there. Going to what you're saying about the independence.
Yeah, I think, the group that owns this resort is wanting that. They're not doing away with public utilities, but they're building that sort of redundancy into it. And actually, by November, we should be 100% solar, meaning we are going to detach the resort from the national power grid. It'll be there in case of, if there's some kind of damage to the solar system, but it's a very sophisticated solar system. It not only generates the power, but there's a massive battery bank that can literally store the power and power the resort for for I think more than a week. So if you had a terrible period where it was stormy and there was not much sunlight, the resort would still function. So that's the kind of background that's the kind of redundancy that people want. If you're looking for plan B for residency to go live somewhere else, then these places are looking for their plan Bs, which is how do we plan for potential problems that could hit here, and if the national power grid goes down, the community that we're building here would still have water, power, food. So that's an interesting element for a lot of people.
So the name of the show is the Global Wealth Fortress Report, and you are in what essentially could be an economic off-the-grid fortress.
Yeah, exactly. The Global Wealth Fortress, means a lot of different things to different people. And at the early part of my career, it was just economics. It was, where do I structure my money? But now you're seeing more and more people. It's about them. Your most precious asset is yourself. So that means second residency, second passport, second place to live, and how do you plan for some of these things so that if things go poorly in your own country, wherever you're from, you have a place to go to that's safe, and you're going to have the resources to support yourself and your family. And so a lot of people view Belize in that context. Other people just like to come here and fish. I flew down yesterday with some guys that were coming in for the sailfish tournament, a big sailfish tournament they have once a year here. I think they said the first prize was $200,000, and they were all drinking and getting excited about coming here to go sail fishing. They wanted to know if they won, whether they could open an account at Key Bank, where I'm on the board, and I said sure, and they said, well, the prize is issued on Sunday. I said, well, if you win, we'll open up just for you so that we can take your deposit. So
that's Key International Bank, right? Key International Bank, folks.
I know you've had Luigi on your show a few times, and he's the man. I'm just on the board, but it was nice to talk to these guys about it. But the point is, people come for all different reasons. In the winter we get snowbirds. This time of year we're getting a lot of fishermen. We get divers throughout the year, but we're seeing more and more people that are looking at Belize really for year-round living. I have a number of clients. 20 years ago that really wasn't the case, but now more and more people are moving here, and they just like the lifestyle. They like the friendliness. Many people have told me it's like going back to my childhood, where neighbors looked out for each other, and there's this general camaraderie that we seem to be losing in the States, which is kind of sad to say. Nobody here's talking about the Ukraine-Russia war. It really is a simpler place. So
it's a simpler, but well, as Gomer would say from Mayberry, as you said earlier, Shazam. It's fantastic. Joel, thank you.
We're really dating ourselves, aren't we, Carter, with those comments?
We need to update our cultural references here. Joel, thank you. This has been excellent report. Covered the spectrum. Fantastic, folks.
Good to be with you.
That is a great option. You want to know more about it? You want to talk to Joel directly about it? There's where to go. Remember, this is America's #1 asset protection attorney, and a tremendous wealth of knowledge, as you just saw. So go hold to Joel. Stop down to Belize. Go to Table Rock. Enjoy yourself there. Visit with him there. Folks, as I tell you every week, let's do this thing.